Hello, my friends. It's time for some adventure in reading and studying the Bible. Apologize for a little rough opening. I don't have a producer here with me today, so everything that goes wrong will go wrong, and I had to fix some of it. But we're on board right now. Welcome to this adventure in studying and thinking about and reading the Bible, letting it speak for itself, trying not to force it into our mold, but letting it mold us, both in its time, culture, and timelessness and culturelessness. We have been digging deep and thinking about the lessons that are found for us in the ancient poetic book of Job. And I'm Pastor Lou Kilgore. This is a ministry of the High Mountain Presbyterian Church, giving you an opportunity to see what it's like to study the Bible with someone who has some extensive study training, using the skills of critical scholarship and trying to apply not a great in-depth knowledge, but trying to apply our knowledge of the culture back then. And then making sure that we understand what they meant then, and then trying to listen for what it might mean for us today. This is really the kind of the new way to read the Bible. It's not simple, but it can be done, and you'll see it can invite you into some adventures of thinking and rethinking perhaps ways that you have thought about what it means to be a believer, to be one who believes in God and believes that God walks with us. We're going to pick up right where we left off. We have been experiencing this character of Job and some of the very surprising things that are a part of Job in terms of how Job understands God and the realm of God, and how God works with us in the world. And I'm not going to go back with a complete review. It's really important, if you don't understand something that I'm making reference to or an assumption I'm making, go back one or two lessons on the YouTube channel, and you'll see stored there lessons 1, 2, and 3. And you might benefit from listening to some of that. In terms of going forward. I have decided we are going to do one more chapter in Job. We need to hear from one of Job's friends. The repetitiousness of it doesn't really begin until you have experienced what the friends of Job say to him about his suffering. Just generally, one of the questions of the text is the same as Rabbi Kushner's book, Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? Job is not good in the sense of always doing things right. He has a way of dealing with his own failures and mistakes, but he is good. He is a good man in that he is a human being who puts his faith in God and never fails. He trusts God. And of course, starting from Genesis, that really kind of is unfolded as the way for humans to live by faith, to trust in God, to walk with God, and no matter what happens, and that's Job's motto. His motto, his way of life is being put to the test. The test is coming from the realm of God. It's coming out of the cabinet room in the domain of God, and God is testing him to see if his faith is deep or if it's just superficial. I think our last chapter was chapter 4. Eliphaz, the Temite, asked if he could venture a word with Job. Job has lost his family, he's lost his fortune, he's lost all of his possessions. Gloom, despair, and agony on me is all I can think of when you think of Job. And a new stage of it has been his own personal physical suffering. He has some version of a kind of leprosy, a skin disease, which is, he's rotting away. He is fully conscious, though, and so aware of his suffering and speaks about it. And his friends have come to him to console him. They sit in silence with him first. and then they open their mouths. Eliphaz is the first. He's a Temanite, and he asks if he might have a word with Job. And his word with Job was, I don't think you're as trusting as you say you are. God is trying to do something to you. God's trying to get you to, trust him more. God is bringing this suffering into your life because of something you've done, that you must be off the path with God. You have to be off the path with God. Job says, let's listen to what Job says. So Eliphaz continues in chapter 5, as if he hasn't already said enough. He basically says to Job, what you're claiming is impossible. There is no human being who actually trusts God in all situations. So admit it, and your suffering will go away. Eliphaz continues in chapter 5. Call now. Is there anyone who will answer you? To which of the holy ones will you turn? Surely vexation kills the fool, and jealousy slays the simple. I have seen fools taking root, but suddenly I cursed their dwelling. Their children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate, and there's no one to deliver them. The hungry eat their harvest, and they take it even out of the thorns, and the thirsty pant after their wealth. For misery does not come from the earth, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. But human beings are born to trouble, just as sparks fly upward. We'll be back to talk about that. As for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. God does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number. God gives rain on the earth and sends waters on the fields. God sets on high those who are lowly, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. God frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands achieve no success. God takes the wise in their own craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are brought to an end. They meet with darkness in the daytime, and they grope at noonday as in the night. But God saves the needy from the sword of their mouth and from the hand of the mighty. So the poor have hope, and injustice shuts its mouth. How happy is the one whom God reproves. Therefore do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. For God wounds, but God binds up. God strikes, but God's hands heal. God will deliver you from 6 troubles. In 7 no harm shall touch you. In famine God will redeem you from death, and in war from the power of the sword. You shall be hidden from the scourge of the tongue. You shall not fear their destruction when it comes. At destruction and famine you shall laugh, and shall not fear the wild animals of the earth. For you shall be in the league with the stones of the field, and the wild animals shall be at peace with you. You shall know that your descendants will be many, and your offspring like the grass of the earth. You shall come to your grave in ripe old age, as a shock of grain comes up to the threshing floor in its season. See, we have searched this out. It is true. Hear this and know it for yourselves. Well, Eliphaz is a systematic thinker. Eliphaz starts with an assumption, a premise. And the premise sounds very full of faith. It has all the essence of what a person who is a person of faith would say. This is a very poetic and sophisticated presentation of what zips by our ears in the world in which we live, all kinds of, I would call them pithy sayings. God won't tempt you more than you're able to endure. God brings suffering, but only to educate you and to train you. God will always be your defender, and if you live right with God, if you are right with God, things will be right in your life. This way of thinking, which is so parallel and so close to the biblical sort of understanding of what a relationship with God in this life really is, it's so close that it's sometimes hard to distinguish. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you are, quote, right with God, if your relationship with God is in good shape, perfect, if you will, then you should be prosperous. You should have wealth. You should be able to endure anything. You should almost be invincible, because the God who made the universe and you are like, you're tight. And Job has offered himself as a person who is tight with God. I'm sorry for the crassness of it, but that's the contemporary idea. I'm tight with God. I'm good with God. And you'll hear, maybe you're familiar with the phrase of the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel makes a similar claim that Eliphaz makes. And that is, if you're right with God and you get right with God, you will prosper. You will live the abundant life. And while there may be some philosophical truth in that claim, you must be very cautious, because you are on thin ice. And then when someone turns that phrase to its inverse, which is, therefore, if you are suffering, and if your life is not going well, you know and I know, Job, that means that your claims about being right with God are false. And Eliphaz even says, look, sometimes God will bring hardship into our lives to perfect us. The Apostle Paul sees it like, he refers to it as a refiner's fire, right? There are these things, I guess it's borrowed out of the blacksmith's world, where iron as a metal is found in the earth, but it's mixed in with all kinds of impurities. And so if you take the metal and you put it into a smelter's fire, or you put it into a kiln, and you put it in there, what will happen is the dross, as they refer to it, all the impurities, everything that's not iron or gold or precious metal, whatever it is, will be burned up. But iron doesn't burn. And so if you superheat it and it becomes intense, the refining takes place. Refining meaning all the impurities are removed. So Eliphaz says, we all know that in life there is a refining of faith that takes place. Yes. But it always leads to the outlet of it. It always leads to the solid gold of a life signed, sealed, and delivered in relationship with God. And that's not what's happening with you, Job. And he has this sentence here that I said we would come back to. He makes this in this phrase. He says, listen, surely vexation kills the fool and jealousy slays the simple. I've seen fools taking root, but suddenly I curse their dwelling. Their children are far from safety, crushed in the gate, and there's no one to deliver them. The hungry eat their harvest, and they take it out of the thorns, and thirsty pant after their wealth, for misery does not come from the earth, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. The human beings are born to trouble, just as sparks fly upward. There's trouble all around. But isn't it possible, Job, that somehow you've sought strength or comfort in some of that human experience? Seek God. That's what Job says to his friend. You need to turn to God. You need to seek God. Stop playing this. I would commit my cause to God. God does great things without number. He gives rain to the earth. He can help you. God can help you. And I'll just say this. Here's a little point of side education in terms of how to read the Bible when it's translated in English. English versions, especially for Protestants and for Christians, always take the pronoun for God and make it he. God, he, God, he. He. Maybe it'll be upsetting to you, but you need to know this. In the original, in the Hebrew, if you could read Hebrew and you go to Job, Jewish scholars today who are fluent in ancient Hebrew read the Torah, they read the ancient books, and they will tell you there is no pronoun for God. It's God. God is not male or female. And remember all the way back, maybe you don't remember from the read-through we've been doing, but please remember that in the Ten Commandments, as we refer to them, one major failing of human beings in their relationship to God is to carve out images of what God is like. God cannot be contained into our human images. One of the images that the Hebrews and today's Jewish scholars will do is to say, do not think of God as a male. Do not. And so they will not put the pronoun in front that calls God he. In fact, every place where G-O-D or where God would be used in order to avoid this very unfortunate thing of casting an image of God made in our image, they don't put anything. They put a blank. They leave it blank. So that you don't even try to intone the name of God. And so when you read the English translations, and I'm reading, this is the Revised Standard Version, the New Revised Standard Version, but in English, it's very uncomfortable for us to not have personal pronouns. And so they choose one, and they put a personal pronoun in. They add it. So over and over, Eliphaz is here saying, he gives rain on the earth and sends water on the field. He sets on high those who are lowly. He frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands achieve no success. He takes the wise in their own craftiness. But he saves the needy. I don't know if I could explain to you how important it is to me that when you read this, if you're reading the Bible, you are not casting graven images of God. I'm not trying to say that God is a female. I'm not. I'm trying to say that God wants to reserve the right to not be cast in any image of human beings. Genesis says that when God reached into the earth and drew the earthling up, the idea was that God was going to create a human being in the image of God. That's from God making us in God's image. Well, that's all right, because that's God, and God is making the creature. But when the voice of God is trying to indicate to Moses in what will be helpful in this relationship, what will really be helpful, God says it would be really, really helpful if you do not put me into a box. I am God, and I reserve the right to exist beyond the frames that you put me in. Now that's not saying, it cannot be that in the Hebrew Bible we think of God as impersonal. This is a personal God. It's all personal. This whole thing of God and Job and his friends and the count in the courts of God, these are relationships. This is not impersonal. This is very personal. God loves Job in a very personal way. But, or I should say, and in that relationship of love, there is room for God, since Job is human, there is room for God to prove that God's partner is exactly as God thinks Job is. Human beings are famous for pretending, or not knowing, or having trouble in the relationship of faith. We're famous for it. Even Adam were the two first most famous human beings. They were the first human beings, and they found it impossible. They said, yeah, the garden is beautiful, but we can't live by faith. We can't do it. So if there's a emergency chute we can pull, or if there's some way to readjust this, we're happy to take a chance on that. All right, enough said about why if you're reading along, I change he to God. It's important. It's a placeholder. Because in this text, we're trying to understand. The ancients are trying to talk to us about who God is and how God is with us in life. How does God relate to us? And what are we to make of it? How then are we supposed to live our lives? What's the ground of our being? What is this relationship with this God who loves us, who loves human beings, who very much wants to be in a working relationship with us, and this is one that God says is working. It's working. Job trusts me. You can hear God bragging through the hallways of heaven. Job trusts me. And then the dimension of God, which I think is a dimension that we also have in our likeness to God, that says, I wonder if it's really true. Thus, the book of Job, we're in the adventure. Eliphaz does not know the full dimension of God. He says, Job, I think God is not testing your faith. I think God is trying to send you a message. What's the secret holdout? What are you not admitting to? Verse 17. You be happier. How happy is the one whom God reproves. Therefore do not despise the discipline of the Almighty. Eliphaz is convinced that Job's suffering is God disciplining Job because God wants Job to relate in some other way to God. God wounds, but God binds up. God strikes, but God's hands heal. This is sort of like the parent saying to the child who's about to be spanked, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you, which, it depends on who's doing the spanking, but honestly, we need to really look at that, whether that's even true. God will give you 6 troubles, and the 7th time around, God will relieve you of all of them. You do not need to fear destruction when it comes to God. Here it comes. Here comes the full prosperity gospel, the full I'm okay and I'm going to be okay. All I have to do is get right with God and everything will be okay. Hear it. At destruction and famine you shall laugh, and you shall not fear the wild animals of the earth. I hear this ancient idea of Eliphaz being danced around a lot in the environment of the faith community and a pandemic. I can't tell you how distressing it is for me to hear Eliphaz's words coming back through the community of faith that says, what are you afraid of? The pandemic cannot harm you. The pandemic cannot harm you. Stop living a life of fear. You don't need to wear a mask. You don't need to do anything to defend yourself. Listen, and destruction and famine you shall laugh. There's a lot of people thinking the way Eliphaz does today, and think how ancient this is. This is ancient, my friends. We have these we have these ruts, what I call thinking ruts, that we get in. There is a thinking rut. A rut is a hole in the road that your wheel drops in, and if you try to turn left or right, you can't turn left or right because your wheel is in the rut. If you've worked with the earth, you know what a rut is. When you're plowing, you have a tractor behind you and it's pulling a plow, and you're trying to keep it straight. But if there is a rut in the field, if there is a place where the wheel to your left drops into the rut, once the wheel is in the rut, your steering wheel will no longer direct your plowing. You're going the way of the rut no matter what, unless you can turn hard and bring this wheel up out of the rut. You have to lift the plow, you have to stop, lift the plow, get yourself out of the rut, and then set your course again, and then sink the plow in the back so that you can plow in the direction of the straight furrow and make it to the other side of the field. There are these thinking ruts, and Eliphaz is naming one of them. If you are good with God, you're invincible. Really, Job, if you're as good with God as you say, okay, you may get knocked around a little bit, if you need a little course correction. But honestly, Job, you should be able to trust God. If you trust God the way you say you do, then you should be able to laugh at pandemics. I don't mean it as a slight or as a light criticism, but you saw the purveyors of this kind of faith. They are all throughout North American Christianity. This approach of Eliphaz saturates our contemporary Christian environment in North America. So you have preachers, and strangely enough, in very large houses of worship, speaking to very large groups of people and saying to them, you people are people of faith. So we're going to have gatherings. Don't bring masks in here. There's mask shaming. And then, of course, I don't know if it happens everywhere, but of course the news media will be quick to show you that right after, the preacher, the pastor, who offers such advice about what it means when you're right with God, gets the virus. Several of them have died. But nobody comes back and then says, whoa, we got to get out of that rut-like way of thinking. No, you just continue along in the rut. Somehow that's an anomaly. Oh, well, that's weird. And if you're really in the mindset of Eliphaz, you say, well, he must have had something secret that he was hiding. He must not have been as right with God as he was claiming to, because eventually we preachers are all disclosed as not being not being nearly the holy people that people think that we are. So the rut of Eliphaz continues. You shall be in a league with the stones of the field. Now, I think again, from a farming mentality, you try to figure out how in the world do these stones just continue to be here all the time. They seem invincible. And stones are a nemesis in the field because they block seeds from sprouting. So you have to pick them up, you got to get them out of the way, but they endure. Or the wild animals. You shall be in league with the stones of the field, and the wild animals shall be at peace with you. You shall know that your tent is safe. And you shall inspect your fold, and nothing will be missing. No one can steal from you. No one can take anything. You can relax. You can live your life because you are now invincible. You should be invincible, Job, for what you've told us about your level of faith, for how you should be invincible. The rut of Eliphaz thinking goes back to the book by Rabbi Kushner. Bad things happen to good people. Eliphaz says, no, they don't. Bad things, troubling things might happen. Little twitches might come along to sort of fine-tune your faith. But if you live in faith, if you abide in faith, and you're trusting the way Job is claiming that he is, and Eliphaz knows not everybody's like this, but Job is outstanding in his faith. He is outstanding. He has faith enough for himself and for his children and for his family. His faith, this is a really interesting concept, because family and the connectivity of human beings to each other, through family especially, was that, here's the very religious, his righteousness could be imputed to somebody else. You could be so good, you could be so strong in faith, that your faith covers the lack of faith for others. Job was that kind, given anyway, claimed anyway, that kind of faith. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. I trust God in the rain and in the snow, in the wind and the storm and the pandemic. Whatever may come, it will go, though the word of God will never go. I think I mentioned this last week. I saw this thing zipping by on social media that said people are crying out in fear, saying, well, the pandemic is everywhere. And then the person's response was, but God is everywhere too. Have faith, don't have fear. That's Eliphaz. Eliphaz says, you shall not fear the wild animals of the earth. You shall know that your tent, your home will be safe because you are a person of faith. No one will be able to steal from you. You shall inspect your fold and miss nothing. You shall know that your descendants will be many. You will have many children because God's reward for faithfulness was to give you eternal life. I think I touched on this last week. Here again is a concept that don't gloss over this. Don't gloss over this. In Job's ancient world and in the world of their understanding of the God of the Bible, God rewards faithful living by giving you eternal life. But eternal life means your life on this earth will go on and on and on and on. You will live on. But living on was not dying and then coming back to life as the New Testament sees it and understands it. In some places, as Jesus talked about it. But living on meant that you would have children. And you live on through your children. You even have physical similarities to them. I see my mom's dad had very strong physical characteristics. First of all, he was thin hair, had big round head, full face, and every now and then I look in the mirror, I see my grandfather. I do. His physical characteristics are carried on through me. And then in order to complete that understanding, the name of that person might be carried to me. We don't do this nearly as much anymore, but George Foreman, the famous boxer, named all of his kids George Foreman. That's this idea. George Foreman will one day grow old and die. But when he does, there'll be lots of George Foremans here. He's received the gift of the blessing of God. God has shown that God was pleased with George Foreman because George Foreman gets the gift of eternal life. Now, am I upsetting you? I hope not. I'm not trying to challenge what you believe. I'm not trying to upset you. I want you, though, to hear you cannot just take concepts from the first century and gloss them back over these readings, which are probably as old as 1,500 years before Christ, maybe older. This may be as many as 3,000 years before Christ. And it does no service to our sense of the holiness of this book and of these writings if we just take a green paintbrush from the first century and say, well, that's the century in which Jesus lived, so everything they thought in the first century now becomes a gloss, and you just go back and you just paint over all this and say, well, we understand better now. I mean, Christians do that because we believe that Jesus brought a more clear picture of God and of life and of the purpose of life. We do. I mean, we can be justly accused of believing that Christianity is superior to Judaism. I don't really think that's true. I think that Christianity, many times Christians get caught up in a vain pride, and they have missed what Jesus said, I did not come to change the law or to redirect the word of the Torah. I have come to fill it full of meaning, that you may not have understood completely what we're talking about here. So this Bible study in the book of Job seeks to gain a real understanding of what they believed. And then we can go off to other books of the Bible or whatever, and we can come to our own understanding of what we believe. And I'm not saying that, whatever you think is right, and what I think is right, and so there's multiple. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying be careful. My motto is let the Bible speak for itself, and then you listen to what the Bible says, and then you figure out what you're going to make of that. If you are a true believer, if you are a human being walking on this earth and you are trusting your life to God, to God's care, and to the future belongs to God, you shall know that your descendants will be many and your offspring like the grass of the earth. And, by the way, you will live a long life. You will live your life until you get ripe. You will come to your grave in ripe old age. In the same way that a shock of wheat comes out of the ground, green, grows tall, beautiful green, waves, and then ages. And as it ages, it turns yellow, and then it becomes brittle, but it stands. And it's there at the end of the appropriate length of the season, ready to be harvested. And when it comes in from the harvest, what does it carry in it? The shock of wheat carries in it as many as 60 or 70 seeds of wheat for the next season. Its life goes on. And Eliphaz says, and we're not kidding about this, Job. These are the facts of life. This is the way life is structured. There's this, it is true. All you have to do, Job, is listen. And know it for yourself. Wow. No breaks. There'll be no breaks, no grace, nothing given to Job. There'll be nothing of a kind of, look, you'll have this in life. These things happen. Stuff happens. Nope. Not there. It's airtight. It's an airtight way of seeing and understanding life. It's a rut. It is a rut. It says that everything that is came from something that was. Every cause has an equal response. It sounds very scientific in some ways. It says, you know, you have to buy in, cause and effect. I'm saying it sounds very scientific. And it may sound scientific, but it is a thinking rut. It's a rut. And it leads Eliphaz to be a very abusive friend. This is abuse. It is abuse. It's the basis of all domestic abuse, violence. That is the abuser who swings and hits his wife, and then, when you go and you're part of the intervention and you meet with the wife, she will tell you, it's okay, it's my fault. It's my fault. If I had arranged the towels in the bathroom so that the hand towel was exactly the right distance and measured distance from the washcloth in the bathroom, if I had just done it right, he wouldn't have gotten angry, and then I wouldn't have gotten beaten. And I don't know why I put the face cloth a little closer to the hand towel. I don't know why I did it. It's in me. It's on me. Do not, police officer, do not arrest him. It's on me. If I had done everything right, I wouldn't have gotten beaten. See, it's tricky, isn't it? It's so subtle. So subtle. If you do right, you will be right. If you live right, things will go right. Work hard, and you will have a good life. I don't want to drain the air out of that is worth its weight in gold in terms of motivating us to work hard. There's nothing wrong with working hard. There's nothing wrong with believing and discovering that in life, in the forward thinkingness of this, if you save money and you're disciplined and you do things in a good way, your life will be better. But the inverse of that, the upside down, inside out of that understanding never works in life. It's a lie. It's a lie then that says that if something goes wrong, that you didn't take the right steps to get where you wanted to go. Now, I only have a little while, but I want to jump into, because I want you to hear how Job responds to his friend. And, okay, so I'm changing again. I'm going to read all the way through Job's response, because I've spent quite a bit of time laying out the accusation, the prosecution, which has come from Eliphaz, the prosecution that comes to us in our lives, that destroys our understanding of how life works, of the living relationship between God and human beings, between human beings and nature. There is a living, moving relationship, the comings and the goings. Family systems therapists have done great work in illustrating that life is not like this in cause and effect, especially in families. They have these mobiles that they'll hang from the ceiling, and so they put a mobile up and they hang a picture of dad here, and they hang a picture of mom here, and then an arm goes out, and then here's sister, and here's brother, and then here's grandma, and so you know how a mobile works, right? It hangs. There's a balance of things. And then family systems therapists, in order to get at this mobility, this power of life, what they will do is they'll go over and they touch the image of the child, right? They just pull a little bit on the character representing the child. And all of a sudden, from one little pull on the child, the entire network in the mobile begins to move. It goes up and down, and people, because of the interconnectedness of our lives and the fluidity of our lives. And you can do the same. We are all part of networks, and things do not happen in a causal relationship of one thing directly to another. They don't. And they certainly don't happen in our lives in a direct causal relationship, like as if this straight line up to God, right? There's only one string, it's down on me, and then it comes from God to me, and so if I'm all bent out of shape, literally, it's because of something I've done, and God is, waiting for me to get it straightened out. Life is not transactional like that. And so families are greatly helped because they get lined up like Eliphaz in blaming and looking for blame and then attempting to change what's causing what's happening in the family, and they sometimes will pick on one person. If that person would just be different. If our drug-addicted daughter would just stop using drugs, then our lives would be good, because she is ruining our lives. She is the source of... And what the family systems therapists say is, you are all part of this drug-addicted network. And that's shocking. It's like unthinkable. And sometimes people get up and they walk out and they go, no, that can't be true. It's 10 of 11. Let me read chapter 6. Let's see in the poetry of it if we can get quickly at what Job says. He's a very strong man. Job answers, "Oh, that my vexation were weighed, and all my calamity laid in the balance. For then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash, for the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks from their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Does the wild ass bray over its grass? Were the ox low over its fodder? Can that which is tasteless be eaten without salt? Or is there any flavor in the juice of mallows? My appetite refuses to touch them. They are like food that is loathsome to me. Oh, that I might have my request, and that God would grant my desire, that it would please God to crush me. Finish it, he says to God. That God would let loose of God's hand and cut me off. This would be my consolation. I would even exult in unrelenting pain. For I have not denied the words of the Holy One. What is my strength that I should wait? And what is my end that I should be patient? Is my strength the strength of stones, or my flesh bronze? In truth, I have no help in me, and any resource is driven from me. Those who withhold kindness from a friend forsake the fear of the Almighty. My companions are treacherous like a torrent bed, like freshets that pass away, that run dark with ice, turbid with melting snow. In time of heat, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course. They go up into the waste and perish. The caravans of Tema look. The travelers of Sheba look. They are disappointed because they were confident. They come there and are confounded. Such you have now become to me. This is to Eliphaz. You see my calamity, and you are afraid. Have I said, make me a gift? Or from your wealth offer a bribe for me? Or save me from my opponent's hand? Or ransom me from the hand of oppressors? Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone wrong. Ooh. How forceful are honest words. But your reproof, what does it reprove? Do you think that you can reprove words? As if the speech of the desperate were wind? You would even cast lots over the orphan and bargain over your friend. But now, be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray, and let no wrong be done. Turn now, my vindication is at stake. Is there any wrong in my tongue? Cannot my taste discern calamity? Wow. So, what is in front of us in this powerful poetry and prose? We are looking at relationships. We are looking at relationships that are stunning. Stunning. What's in front of us is the relationship between God and a human being. And it is stunning. This human being, this man, Job, he will not be led astray. He knows that his trust has always been in God, and it will continue to be in God, and he will not waver from that trust. It doesn't mean that he doesn't feel pain. He feels tremendous pain. He has the capacity for tremendous suffering, as we do in humanity. This past week, a couple of times, the whole image, which is hard to even gather in my mind, of the suffering of people in concentration camps, stripped naked, denigrated, despised, like completely, like, how many ways can you think of to torture a human being? But the resilience in the lives of people who always knew. This is about the evil in the hearts of those who are doing this to us. This is not because we deserve this. It's not. Now, I'm sure that was part of the mental battle that went on in people's lives, but they surviving in that experience, the surviving of it, the indomitableness of the human spirit is on display here in the person of Job. Job is like the prisoner in the concentration camp. He is like the African American man and woman trapped in a plantation, their children taken away from them, their lives debased, women are raped, children that are from those experiences are raised to only further the productivity of the farm. The men are beaten and dominated in their lives, but in the resilience of the human spirit, they survive and they do never accept what is said about them. You get this kind of treatment, you get this whipping, you get this beating because of who you are, the kind of half-human that you are. You are not deserving of goodness and kindness. You deserve what's happening to you. You couldn't bribe me, Job says, to believe what you think about me. Nope. I'll just sit here and suffer. Because what you have to offer me, your words are so full of lies and distrust and falsity. I'm going to give you back the truth, my friend Eliphaz. I'm going to deliver the words from my mouth, which are true. I trust the Lord. I will not lie to your face. Turn, I pray, let no wrong be done. Stop what you are doing, Eliphaz. Stop it. Stop it. You are self-justifying. You are lifting yourself up because your children haven't died. You don't have leprosy. You think it's because you're better than I am. You think you're smarter than I am. You think I am somehow deserve what's happening to me. This is what goes on in the world of working with young people and taking them into places of desperate condition. When we would take people into Appalachia, the first day and a half, we didn't go out to the homes. We sat with them and said, you have got to unpack your suitcases of judgment against people to look in their lives and think that you know why they're suffering. It's only not going to be helpful. You are going to bring coals of fire upon yourself and them. You will not be helpful. You walk into a living room, and we would go into and always treated it like we were being invited into the castle of the Queen of England. We would go into a person's home, and we would find that she had developed somehow this habit of collecting 1-gallon milk jugs. And she kept them in her house, all throughout her house. There were these clear white plastic milk jugs, and she didn't rinse them out. And the house smelled of rotten milk. Such was her condition of breaking down under the weight of poverty and disease. She was a broken human being. But the one thing that did not help was for kids from the suburbs who had everything they've ever wanted to come into her house and go, oh, let us clean this all up. This is terrible. This is shameful. Oh, doesn't it stink in here? Oh, we had to literally surgically remove that temptation from those children and say, if you're going to be helpful, you walk into that house and you must act like as if that smell of rotten milk is the best perfume you've ever smelled, because you were smelling it because of her willingness to let you into her life. Well, I did what I was going to do. I read Job's pushback. And we've come to the end of our time. I started a few minutes late. I'm trying very hard to stay on the 1 hour time. Because I think any longer than that, it's too much to try to listen in one sitting. And so, thank you. Thank you for coming and being a part of this today. I hope it's helpful to you. I believe in all of my heart that these things that we're talking about are things that all of us struggle with in our lives. Why are things going well? Why aren't things going well? How are we to think about God in relationship to that? Who am I in relationship to God? All these things. This is the water wheel of our life. And so I'm hopeful that somehow hearing the way Job and the writers of Job about what I ultimately believe, that this is God revealing God's self to us, hoping that we will be strengthened in our journeys of faith. I hope that for you. I pray that for you. And I pray that you stay safe. Don't get involved in this rut-like thinking that leads you into believing that what comes in your life must necessarily be because you've somehow failed God. Hard things happen in life, my friends. Really hard things happen, and we'll all be better off if we can come at them with laying our suitcases of judgment against each other down and get busy in the work of living and loving and sharing in God's goodness. That's all for today, my friends. I will see you next week. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving holiday, and I hope you practice it safely. Be willing to give up what you need to give up today so that you can be together with your families in the years to come. God bless you.